Directorate of Information Technology, Business Strategy and Support at Kent County Council, who is host for this session, to formally start the conference. Peter.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you all for joining us. Before I get into the main text of what I wanted to talk about this morning, I would like to express a vote of thanks for all of the sponsors of today's event. All of us are familiar with the challenges facing public service finances at the moment. And we wouldn't be able to continue to hold events like this if it weren't for the support of our private and commercial partners. I'd particularly like to express thanks to the Kent Business School for their generous funding as our primary sponsors today, including all of the refreshments. So any complaints, please speak to Harsh. In addition, Ascensio, KPSN, Meta Compliance, NDL, Siemens, Unisys, for both the conference and the seminars which are going to take place today. I would ask you all to make the most of the opportunity to access the exhibitions and talk to those sponsors given their support of our event today. Finally, I'd like to mention that we are joined today by two roving social reporters from Bole. I did worry about actually getting that name right this morning. As I say, they're available and will be around and about all of today. And if you are asked to provide a quick interview, please do so, as we'd be keen to actually see the output via that medium, particularly as this is a technology conference. Okay. The holding of this conference is really at a point of step change for Kent Connects, and I wanted to use this session as a mix of looking back, looking about how the partnership came about, the successes we've achieved, and most importantly, where we go next. I did also think long and hard about what some of the content should be, and given that this is intended in part to be a sharing exercise, I have chosen to include some of the downs and negatives as well as the ups. But there's always value in lessons learned. The story today. Although it was never quite a beards and sandals event, Kent Connects emerged from regular informal chats between Kent's local authority IT managers around all things technical, followed by an early adjournment to the pub. I have heard it said that that was the high watermark of the partnership, but we've moved on a little bit since then. As might be anticipated, it was the government of the day that came along to spoil the party. They came up with this devious idea of putting some money on the table with the dreadful catch of expecting something delivered in return. I frequently hear the comment that central government does not understand local government, but on the evidence of the government agenda, perhaps that's not the case. As a consequence of the government initiative, as a partnership, we never looked back, and from a group of IT managers having a chat, we became Kent Connects, and from talk we moved to delivery. In thinking about what to include today, whilst the dominant topic is of course technology and the way in which we've been driven as a partnership by technology, I think what's really been most important for me is to see the way that the partnership has more and more been responding to the public services agenda and ultimately achieving benefits through supporting public service outcomes. And I hope through some of the examples I'm about to run through, we can evidence how we've supported that agenda in practice. One of the most important projects that we engaged in over that period was the development of the Kent Public Service Network, and that does form the basis of one of the case studies this afternoon. From the outset, that programme was never about simply putting in bits of wire and fibre to join up a number of public service offices. It was always driven by a concept of adding value within the community and as a potential vehicle for shared services and partnership. In order to get that maximum value out of the public services network, we looked at an architecture, so the contribution of the technologists, that would support the development of services for the public. And it's long been on Kent's agenda that broadband is important. And we saw an opportunity that if we could bring together the scale of public services, not just part of public services, we would be able to deliver the network in a way that added direct value to the Kent's communities and in particular Kent's small and medium enterprises. This approach worked on the basis that if we could get sufficient public sector sites in a locality around a BT exchange, and we used that exchange in part of how we delivered the public services network, there was an opportunity to use that engagement with the commercial sector to see an increase in the commercially available services to Kent's SMEs. When KPSM was initially implemented, we saw a 55% increase in the availability of business broadband across Kent. Had we taken a different route to that investment, it would have probably cost the taxpayer, through direct investment, something in the order of £1.8 million. So by doing something that we had to do anyway, we were able to utilise that in a way that directly supported the wider objectives of public services. Even more importantly, the Kent Public Services Network has continued to grow to attract more public sector partners. And that's important because the more sites, the more public services partners who come on board, the greater that return that's directly felt within our communities. And that figure where we started out of £1.8 million worth of extra benefit has since increased by a further £500,000 through that engagement of other public agencies. So a very, very positive outcome for Kent Connects is that that was part of the plan from the outset. So it's never just about the technology, it's about how we utilise that technology to deliver better outcomes for the communities we serve. Having said that, of course, we all like the technology, and that connectivity between us is a great vehicle for joining up services. And almost before the fibre was in the ground, we started to look at what other services could we start to run across this network. And our starting point was data centres. We all use data centres. I know, having been involved in some of the initiatives in central government, they were talking something in the order of 3,000 or 4,000 data centres across central government alone. And there's got to be opportunities for rationalising that capacity. We like to think we're always a bit ahead of the game in Kent, and our regional data centre, again subject to another seminar this afternoon, has been Phase 1's been in place based in Medway Unitary Council's site at Gunwall since 2010. Not only does this offer the opportunity for sharing between public agencies and reducing costs, one of the interesting partners we have in that development is a commercial partner involved in the delivery of public services who've chosen to utilise that facility as a means of reducing the costs that they then recharge to public services. So again, we're starting to see the development of partnerships that go beyond just public services, but different ways of working with the private sector as well. The next opportunity came with the introduction of a mandated link from all local authorities into central government, a secure extranet called GCSX. The original intention was to have links going from central government into every individual local authority in the country. Being bright sparks in Kent, we said, oh, we've got a single network. Isn't this an opportunity to have just one link, saving a considerable amount of money and sharing that one link via KPSN into central government? That's the route we went, and conservative figures of how much has been saved through that approach is in the order of £500,000 plus. So far, so good, you might think. And I can very glibly talk about all of those successes. In practice, getting there hasn't been that easy. I think I would put the challenges and the obstacles under three broad headings. The first being HM government, the second being suppliers, and the third being partners. If I start off with HM government, we see some excellent policies from government, and we've been aware and have tried to respond to the agenda around joined up working and partnership coming out of the Cabinet Office for a number of years. In practice, there are other bits of government working, dare I say it, in silos, which completely conflict with that agenda. I mentioned that benefit we gained from that joint link from Kent into central government. We had to fight tooth and nail to get central government's permission to have that single link. And that cannot be right. We must have better joined up government between central and local. Worse than that, we originally didn't want to have that single link from Kent. We wanted to actually utilise the link that already existed between central government and the London authorities. So actually, joining up Kent was a number two option. We ideally would have made use of something that already existed. The rationale for not being able to progress that agenda actually came from the security services. So on the one side, we've got the Cabinet Office quite rightly saying there is benefit to public service in joining up. On the other side, we've got, oh, this needs to be highly secure. We can't trust different public agencies to work together and talk to each other. It's one of the challenges I think that we have to continue to be mindful of and try to address. I mentioned our suppliers. Our suppliers are great, they're one of our sponsors today, and very, very positive input in how they've engaged with us. But in the early days, one of the big challenges was to persuade our commercial supplier to work with us as a partnership. The number of times we were asked to, and yes, but which authority are we dealing with? Well, you're dealing with us all. We're a partnership. That's how we want to work. So again, there was a learning curve there where not just did public services have to think about how they were going to work together, but also the response from the supplier. That's relevant to both sides. Partners. I probably can't understate how difficult it is to actually achieve successful partnership with any number above 1. Around our Kent Connects table, we have 16 partners, and we found over the years a very positive way of working, which is an initiative comes along and then those that are interested sign up. The numbers are irrelevant. As long as it's more than 2, that's okay. But it can be a challenge. And as the benefits of partnership become very easily recognisable, we are now potentially facing a new challenge, which is the number of partnerships. Just think about when I was coming along here this morning, that one of the disadvantages is partnership card. Partnership card. A partnership card. There is a challenge in terms of actually managing part of what we're building. So, whilst I like to think we've been highly successful in Kent in actually addressing those issues, there are hard lessons to be learned to actually get those positive outcomes at the end of it. But less of negatives, back on to the positives. One of our other major successes is in trying to improve the basic technologies available to public services in Kent. We've jointly approached and invested in an aggregated remote access solution. As everybody tries to move towards more flexible ways of working, we all start looking for new technology solutions to help us achieve that. That is a prime opportunity to actually come together as partners and invest in a new direction. It's a lot easier to put a partnership together around things that are new rather than to unpick and reinvent what's already there. And that's proved to be highly successful for us. Okay. Suddenly realised that I've not been pressing the buttons, I've been moving along, but without anybody noticing, I'll be catching up on the slides as I go in the rest of the session. Okay. As we look towards the future, we know that we need to change and evolve as a Kent Connects partnership. As I say, we moved from that talk shop to a group of local authorities plus Kent Fire and Rescue that aims to actually deliver really positive outcomes through practical projects on the ground. But part of what's happened over that period is that I think we've identified that Kent Connects as a partnership actually needs to change and grow. We hit a problem as we implemented KPSN that we started to attract public services partners who were not members of Kent Connects. So most recently, tertiary education, who are represented today, migrated their networks onto KPSN. We have a PCT who become members of that particular arrangement. But because the governance arrangements do not fit around Kent Connects, we're currently having to run now 2 partnerships in parallel. And one of